had enough space where they could all receive the sun all the time. So stacking them up does not mean that you're going to get more or better production.
That's interesting because it seems to be heavily touted in sustainable industry and in the green.
Well, and that's what I was going to say. I mean, Marilyn, I think, hit on it. It's interesting. It's very cool. You look at the New York Times or Times Magazine, you see these high rises with all these futuristic looking models of how we're going to grow plants, and there's going to be animals on this floor and fish on this floor, and it's all going to be interconnected. It's very, very cool and fun stuff to talk about and discuss. But I think that what we all need to be careful of when we're looking at this and trying to figure out how are we going to grow and support the growing needs of fresh food in our country is where's the proof that it is. Like, we can talk about it, but I think that if we're looking for what works, we need to look what has a history of working and providing food all over the world. I mean, the U.S. is so far behind the world technology when it comes to growing hydroponically. It's silly. I mean, you look to Holland, you look to New Zealand, you look to Australia, and all of these countries have a much more unified hydroponic sector that has been doing this for many, many, many years, providing the majority of their fresh produce. And it's not by going vertical. It's by utilizing the land and growing in the most efficient way. And so, again, here in the U.S., we're very ADHD. And so any pretty new little thing that's shiny is going to make us turn our heads.
Well,
I think we just need to be very careful.
The vertical growers, the answer to what we just said, too, will be, well, you can put lights on it. And lights are a huge thing. We hear from people every day who want to grow hydroponics inside some old building. The reality is you could knock that building down and put a greenhouse there, and in the end you would save money by using the natural sunshine rather than trying to replace the natural sunshine with artificial lighting, which is the answer that you'll hear from a vertical grower. We'll just put artificial lighting on it. You've got to look at the cost of not only the expense of those lights, but the operation of the lights, the replacement of the bulbs, and
the quality of the product you're going to get from growing under artificial lighting. There's a lot of research and a lot of money being spent on artificial lighting. And someday we may reach that point where we can grow 100% under artificial light and do a better job than under the sun. But it currently isn't available, and the technologies that they're experimenting with are ridiculously expensive, and it will be many, many years before the cost of those come down if they are the answer. So what we're saying isn't that it just can't be done. It just can't be done efficiently, cost-effectively, profitably now.
There are many places in the world now, I've done a lot of shows on climate and weather, that are suffering from cold. It's interesting, in this supposed context of global warming, they have seen record-breaking cold weather around the world. And in China, thousands of miles of crops were damaged, pig farms, all kinds of plant life that was ruined, and obviously in other places in the world when you have inclement weather like this. And so maybe in some places of the world, hydroponics could be a backup solution because the weather is erratic and unstable and too cold and depend on traditional growing methods. So in that case, maybe they use full spectrum lighting, which is like the sun, and they do produce something indoors with not artificial but full spectrum lighting or something better until they can grow something outside. And what do you think about that?
When I say indoors, my other alternative would be in a greenhouse, which allows the sunshine to come through. I'm talking about a building that's got walls and a roof on it that people want to convert to a growing
Oh, I see. Okay.
space. You compare that to the cost of putting up a greenhouse, which a greenhouse structure is fairly inexpensive, and it's allowing all that free sunshine that's right there above, in the sky to come into the greenhouse without a cost of using electricity to create that light.
What if, for example, someone puts together a greenhouse like you're describing, and they have erratic weather where they don't get enough sun for the plants to be growing properly? How would you know if they needed to add something else to make it grow?
It would be my suggestion in that case then that what they have to take a look at is what is their electric rate. we know how much light that you need to supplement sunshine. And to several growers across the country, we've suggested that why don't you put up a couple bays with lights and figure out what your costs are and how much more production you get in your area by having supplemental lighting. And that's the only way you can tell yourself whether it's practical or not to do that. Are you getting enough extra production out of those greenhouses to pay for the lighting costs of operating the lights as well as the cost of purchasing the lights and then maintaining them? Have you increased your production on food enough to pay for that?
Do you find that most people don't know what they're getting into when they come to you?
I think a lot of people have a lot of romantic ideas of how wonderful it'll be to have a greenhouse and grow food and spend time in the greenhouse. And all that's really nice, but there's a lot of labor involved in it too, and you're running a business, and it's not something that you do when it's fun or when it sounds like a good idea. It's something you have to be in your greenhouse every day.
I will tell you something that's a legitimate concern that I've been noticing in conversation. People have a growing concern, no pun intended here, that food costs are escalating and food quality is diminishing, and they are concerned they want to be able to have their own food. How much does it cost for a person to establish a greenhouse with hydroponics, and give us an example of something full scale? I'm not trying to pin you down to cost because it depends how much equipment they get.
Are you talking about a commercial operation or something for somebody in their backyard to supply their family?
Do you have an option for that?
We do sell a range of smaller greenhouses called our Sanctuary line. They range from, I think, 12 by 12 up to 18 by 28. And, you can put up a relatively, we would consider those to be relatively small greenhouse structures and put, heating, cooling, environmental controls, et cetera, into that. And I think a 18 by 28 is probably somewhere in that $6,000 range for heating, cooling, environmental controls, and
probably
the structure.
A little more than that, I would say.
How much could be grown in that? Let's take a 18 by 28.
We don't really, there isn't anything that we've said you can produce X number of pounds out of that, but you could more than amply create enough fresh lettuce and tomatoes or cucumbers to supply probably the majority of a family's needs of fresh produce.
And that kind of is like if you put out a garden that's 10 by 20, how much produce you're going to get out of it.
How intensively are you planting it? What are you growing? Things like that are all going to play into it. But that's a nice sized hydroponic system. Just a small our greens, leaf and greens kit that we have. We have a small. That's 6 channels, Marilyn?
I believe it is 6 4-foot
6 channels that have 6 spots, so it's 36 heads of lettuce. Can be, if the whole thing is planted out at the same time, and if you're growing that under if you're growing that under an artificial lighting, you could probably get indoors under artificial lighting. You're probably going to get 12 crop rotations out of that a year. So if you could harvest 36 heads of lettuce every month, you could eat a head of lettuce every day.
Amazing.
But as far as a commercial system,
right.
They range from small. Our smallest commercial system is 30 feet wide and 128 feet long. A 30 by 128-foot greenhouse, which is our smallest commercial greenhouse, will hold 6,192 plant spaces or heads of lettuce at one time. You'll rotate each one of those spaces about 12 times in a year, which means that greenhouse over the course of a year could produce 74,300 heads of lettuce. And that's our smallest commercial greenhouse. They go up from that to something we call a gutter connect greenhouse, where each bay is 22 feet wide and 128 feet long. 16 bays is an acre. In an acre of lettuce production, you would produce 74,000 heads of lettuce at one time. And again, each plant position in the greenhouse, and there's 74,000 of them, you could rotate it 12 times a year. So you're going to produce over 800,000 heads of lettuce out of an acre of